Hey, how you doing, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you all for joining me today. Continuing on with our 30 teams in 30 days for the entire month of August. We finished off every single team in the Pacific Division. Now we will start our tour around the Central Division, starting with the defending Stanley Cup champs, the Chicago Blackhawks. This is episode 10 of Hockey on the Spot. So, the Chicago Blackhawks. What a season. And not just any season either. In a lockout shortened season, it was a season of historic moments. They not only won the Stanley Cup, but they also won the President's Trophy in great fashion. They began the year 24 games in a row without a loss in regulation. So a 24 game point streak, which surpassed the original record held by the 06-07 Anaheim Ducks, which was originally 16 games. And they became just the 40th team in NHL history and the first since the 2007-2008 Detroit Red Wings to win both the President's Trophy and the Stanley Cup. Also their second Stanley Cup in 4 years. And this time they didn't have to go through a major roster overhaul. So things went well for the Chicago Blackhawks in what was a very good playoff run too. Tough at times, but overall they proved to be the seemingly unbeaten team that they were in the regular season, and a team that is very close to building a dynasty, something that the NHL has not had in a very long time. In the first round, they knock off the Minnesota Wild in easy 5 games. That was probably their easiest series. And the series after that was their toughest series, however. In the second round, they go up against the Detroit Red Wings, and they won the first game. They destroyed them in the first game. However, after that, it was all Red Wings. They won the next 3 games, and it looked like the Blackhawks were done, but their willingness to never give up pushed them to win the next 3 games after that. The Blackhawks trailing the series 3-1, come back to win the series in Game 7 on an overtime winner by Brent Seabrook. So a classic 7-game series by 2 original 6 rivals, which was great, and a way to send the Red Wings off to the Eastern Conference. The perfect way to do it. And then the next 2 series after that, they knock off the previous defending Stanley Cup champs, the Los Angeles Kings, in 5 games. And then last but not least, taking on the Cup champs from the year before that in 6 games, the Boston Bruins. So an excellent run for the Chicago Blackhawks, and an excellent offseason as well. This wasn't a team that had to go out and get all sorts of players. And unlike the 2010 team, after they knocked off the Philadelphia Flyers, they didn't need to basically trade away half their roster because this time they were not over the cap. But they did get rid of some players from that Cup team, and some pretty valuable ones too. They traded Dave Bolin to the Toronto Maple Leafs for a few draft picks. He was starting to fade out of their system, and they had every intention of trading him when the season was over, despite the fact that he did score the Cup-winning goal. A guy who really has faded out of their system because of injuries. They dealt Michael Frolik to the Winnipeg Jets, also for a bunch of draft picks. This is the one that I probably have the most questions about, why they would trade him, and I don't understand why they traded him, to be honest, and it's a very risky thing to do because he was one of their most valuable, if not their most valuable, penalty killer last year, playing alongside Marcus Kruger. So that was a very interesting one. And then they also traded Danny Carcillo to the Los Angeles Kings for a draft pick for next year's draft. Another guy who had faded out of their system a long time ago. So he reunites with Jeff Carter and Mike Richards in LA. They let Victor Stahlberg go via free agency. He signs with the Nashville Predators, a good young player. And they also let goaltender Ray Emery go. He was ready to become more of a starter anyway, but he returns to the Philadelphia Flyers, his second time over there, as it becomes pretty obvious that Corey Crawford is basically now the number one in Chicago. And also, the Chicago Blackhawks finally able to get both Steve Montador, defenseman, and Rostislav Olesh, left winger, out of Chicago. They've been wanting to get those guys out for the last year. Rostislav Olesh goes to the New Jersey Devils, signs a 1-year deal there. Steve Montador is still unsigned by anybody. He's still a free agent, but he definitely won't be coming back to Chicago. Both of them did not play a single game last year, and the year before that, Olesh only played 6 games. Montador played most of the season the year before that, but he was a pretty big disappointment. So they've been wanting to get those guys out. And then the other guy who's still an unrestricted free agent but will not be returning to Chicago is Jamal Mayers, but he could potentially retire this offseason. He's not getting any younger. So now, with all these guys leaving, the Blackhawks were able to re-sign a bunch of guys, but most importantly, their head coach, Joel Quenneville, who they signed to a 5-year extension, and left winger Brian Bickle, who at one point looked like was going to leave, but in the end, he never really wanted to. He signed in Chicago. They were also able to re-sign Marcus Kruger and Nick Leddy, 2 good youngsters. Leddy, despite not having a great postseason and seeing his ice time lost at points, they still believe that he can be a good player, so they get him signed. Same with Marcus Kruger, one of their most valuable penalty killers last year. And they also re-signed veterans Michael Roosevelt, who had a great playoff this past year, and Michael Handzus. He is not getting any younger, so they signed him to a 1-year deal. Also played great when they got him from the San Jose Sharks prior to the trade deadline. So they'll probably use him in a smaller role this season. And that leads us to the real big question in Chicago: who will become their second line center? It's very it's a very interesting topic. They don't know who they're going to have as their second line center. There is the option, of course, to go after a guy like Mikhail Grabovski, but it's pretty obvious that the Chicago Blackhawks are going to go from within. And what really told that story is the fact that they really didn't go out and do anything major as far as bringing in new faces. The biggest signing that they made this offseason was to bring Nikolai Habibulin back. He's coming over from the Edmonton Oilers. They signed him to a 1-year deal. He'll be the backup goaltender for Corey Crawford. He's not the same goalie he used to be. That showed in Edmonton. Nikolai Habibulin, for him, this is his second stint as a Chicago Blackhawk. Last time he was there, he was the starter. He will not be the starter there anymore. But that is technically their biggest signing, and that's not saying a lot. They also signed another player coming over from the Edmonton Oilers, defenseman Theo Peckham. They signed him to a 1-year deal. Very physical defenseman, a rough guy, a shutdown defenseman as well. Only played 4 games last year for the Oilers, so he started to fade out of there. He is a guy who could play solid hockey, but it does give the Blackhawks an 8th option on defense. They also brought in a 9th option on defense too. Michael Koska from the Toronto Maple Leafs, also to a 1-year deal. He played 35 games last year, had 8 assists during the regular season, and he played 1 playoff game as well. So he's another solid option on defense. So really, that was what their offseason was about, bringing in a backup goaltender to replace Ray Emery and 2 defensemen that could fill an 8th and 9th defenseman role, as Sheldon Brookbank is the clear number 7. So it expands their options on defense. They also have a youngster in their system, Adam Clendenning, who is another guy who could battle for that 9th spot maybe, and a guy who could play up in the NHL level, say if a guy like Nick Leddy or Michael Roosevelt failed to perform. So those would probably be the two most likely guys that would do that. But I find it highly unlikely for Roosevelt, maybe more Letty. But anyway, they re-signed a bunch of their guys, and now again with looking at their main roster right now on their website, only 10 players listed on that roster, which tells you that they're going to be bringing up a couple of youngsters. One of them has already been brought up. They already know that Ben Smith is finally going to play a full season for them. He's been a good player for them in the few opportunities he's had, but now he'll play for them full time. He's 25 years of age, and he'll basically be Michael Frolik's replacement, and he'll become a very reliable guy for them on the penalty kill. So Ben Smith, their number 2 prospect, is definitely going to play. And then their other options, they have some other options too. It's pretty likely that Brandon Peary, who led the American Hockey League in scoring last year with 75 points in 76 games, it's pretty likely he's going to play. And pretty much he's going to probably be their number 2 center. There are some other options. The one option to move Brandon Saad from left wing to center. He's played center before, which he did do at points in his junior career. So Brandon Saad knows what it's like to play center. Patrick Sharp can also play center, but they prefer him on the left wing. So they won't do that unless they absolutely have to. Michael Handzus would definitely be the safest option as their second line center. But again, they want to use him in a smaller role, particularly a fourth line role, possibly even on the wing. So that's another option they're going to look at. But in the end, my personal opinion, I have a feeling Brandon Peary is ready. I think he's going to be the guy who will be their second line center. He is a pure center. Again, led the American Hockey League in scoring last year for the Rockford Ice Hogs. He's basically a born center, and a guy he is their number 1 prospect also. So he's ready. And then, of course, there's the option of who else is going to play with Dave Bolland gone, or they have an extra space now, or more with Victor Stahlberg gone, actually, for another youngster to step up. I'm placing my bets on a guy like Jeremy Moran, their number 3 prospect, but they do have some other options, guys like Jimmy Hayes or Kevin Hayes, one of those two. Drew LeBlanc is another option, and actually he's another option as their second line center as well. He's their number 5 prospect. They re-signed him to a 1-year deal as a possible candidate. He played 2 games for the Hawks last year at the end of his college career. He's 25 years of age. So he's another kid who could be put into that role, or at some role in the NHL level. They're definitely going to look into him. So that's really the biggest question for the Chicago Blackhawks. Who is going to be their number 2 center? Again, I'm placing my bets on Brandon Peary. So we'll see, though. We'll see how it all works out for the Chicago Blackhawks. Another big option, who's going to be their new goaltending coach? Stefan Waite, who was their old goaltending coach, had left the Blackhawks. He goes to the Montreal Canadiens. And now both Corey Crawford and Nikolai Habibulin without a goaltending coach. So they're going to hope to find one very soon. That's probably their number 1 priority right now, actually. But, we'll see what happens. And again, how well is Nikolai Habibulin going to get along with Corey Crawford? That remains to be seen. And of course, what are the lines going to look like too? Well, we already know the top line will most likely be what they went with in the playoffs, at least to start the year. Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane, and Brian Bickle as their number 1 line. Patrick Sharp and Marian Hossa will be the second line wingers. Of course, again, still the question of their second line center, but we'll say Brandon Peary. For their third line, maybe guys like Brandon Saad on the left wing, assuming he stays there. Jeremy Moran is another option, and Andrew Shaw also. And then, of course, on the fourth line, maybe you move Michael Handzus from center to left wing. He plays there. Marcus Kruger plays at center, and then Ben Smith maybe would play on the right. So there are definitely some options left to be open. And the whole defense core from last year's Stanley Cup Finals is back. Nobody is going to be different from that defense core. Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Nicholas Chalmerson, Johnny Oduya, Nick Leddy, Michael Roosevelt, and then, of course, Sheldon Brookbank, their seventh guy. But now, of course, they add Theo Peckham as their eighth, and then Michael Koska as a possible ninth, and also Adam Clendenning, a possible youngster. And then in goal, again, Corey Crawford, the starter, and Nikolai Habibulin, who isn't getting any younger, as the backup goaltender in place of Ray Emery. So it's pretty much the same team, only no Michael Frolik, no Dave Bolin, no Victor Stahlberg, and no Ray Emery. So those are the only guys of importance not back. Again, Jamal Mayers and Danny Carcillo were all played games in that season, but they are both gone pretty much. And then the other guys who left did not play at all. So okay, now let's take a look at the prospect pool for the Chicago Blackhawks. The Chicago Blackhawks, looking at this prospect pool, very, very impressive. As impressive as their regular team is, their prospect pool is almost as, if not just as, impressive. This is a team that is building a dynasty, or the closest thing to it in the modern day era of hockey. Again, Brandon Peary, Ben Smith, and Jeremy Moran, their top three. Adam Clendenning, number 4. Drew LeBlanc, number 5. They got a couple of guys also on this list. Antti Ranta, who they re-signed to a one-year deal. He could battle for at some point in the future as backup goaltender, possibly. And then their 2 first-round picks from 2011, Philip Deneau and Mark McNeil, also on there as 9 and 10, which tells you how deep it is. But the one prospect on this list that really impresses me, and probably impresses me more than anybody, is without question their number 7 prospect, Teuvo Teravainen. Teuvo Teravainen was their first-round draft pick in 2012, 18th overall, and oh my gosh, I've never seen a kid or with as slick of hands like him since Pavel Datsyuk. This kid has absolutely slick hands. He's a winger. He had his career year in Finland last year. And this is a kid who, in the near future, is going to be a superstar in the National Hockey League and a top 6 forward. He's going to play in Finland for another year, maybe another 2 years. That's the idea. And maybe even play a year in the American Hockey League. This is a kid who they're going to bring along slowly, and that's a good thing because they want him to develop his all-around game, and that is a great thing. I like him, though. I think he has a bright future in the National Hockey League. Now, last but certainly not least, the player on the Chicago Blackhawks that I think needs to play well this season in order for the Blackhawks to repeat as possible Cup champions and, of course, get into the playoffs, without a doubt, has to be Nick Leddy. Nick Leddy, not a good postseason last year, as I said earlier. His ice time got smaller and smaller with each passing game, and even during the final stretch of the regular season, he slumped offensively, and he was a minus rating. He has not been good in the later stages. He has not been good in a very long time. He's been going through a bit of a slump, the sophomore slump, I guess you could say. And again, even though the Hawks won the Cup, there's still room for a better season. Nick Leddy, improvement, I mean. There's still room for improvement, and Nick Leddy's a big part of that. He really exemplifies that. So if they want to possibly repeat as champions, Nick Leddy needs to have a breakout year, have a breakout junior season. Last but certainly not least, are the Blackhawks a playoff team? No doubt about it. This team on paper is probably the best team in the National Hockey League again, and the most likely candidates to win the Stanley Cup and possibly repeat. So there's no excuse why they should not make the playoffs. With what they've been able to build, especially with Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane and Marian Hossa, Patrick Sharp, Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, those 5 guys, and of course Corey Crawford, they're pretty much set for a long, long time. So they should make the playoffs, and they could possibly repeat. Okay, guys, that'll do it for episode 10 of Hockey on the Spot. And for our next episode, we are going to cover the Colorado Avalanche. So until then, this has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you, and have a great day.